Jessica, how are you?
I'm doing okay, Dennis. I'm
You
doing
like that
okay.
intro? Okay, that's lame. That was so lame. There's something to unpack there. I just jumped into it. I'm Dennis Gillan with the Half a Sorrow Foundation. Welcome to It's a Tough Subject with my co-host Jessica Seel. And you heard it, she's just okay. If you ask somebody that question, they say just okay. That's an invitation for a further conversation.
Unless you're over a certain age and you start really going into the details, I think just okay is better. And say, well, my toe hurts, my knee hurts, I've got arthritis, whatever.
All right. All right.
So
We'll leave it at
just
that.
okay.
All right. I feel like you're a little bit down. I'm a little bit up. And the yin and the yang will try to bring each other up somehow, some way. Or, Jessica, if you want, bring me down.
I want to start with the bringing up because I need it. So let's hear your excitement and what's going on.
Oh, well, I'm riding the high. I got back. I was invited to speak in a conference in Michigan, and I've been following this conference for years. This is their 9th annual. It's called Kevin Song. Now, Kevin Song, if you name a conference after somebody and it's suicide prevention, guess what? We lost Kevin, and it's very sad. Kevin Urso died by suicide at age 41. His parents, Gail and John Urso, started putting on this conference to get the biggest minds that matter on this topic, like the scientific brains together. And then they do some stuff where they reach to the community. And that's where I came in. I'm not a scientific guy, but they brought in guys. If you follow suicide prevention, like watch what they're doing down at Florida State with Thomas Joyner, big researcher. He was there. They brought in a guy from Missouri by the name of Dr. Bart Andrews. He was there. These are keynote speakers. And then they brought me in to do a keynote. Yay.
The real star.
That's it. They said, enough of these guys with all these PhDs. Let's bring in a guy that barely got out of college, whose blood alcohol level was just as high as his GPA. Let's bring that guy in. And I make light of that. But there was, after my brother died, post-traumatic behaviors. We've all talked about that. I went on a bender. Barely got out of school, but sober 31 years. Got to put that out there.
Whoop,
So
whoop.
I had two presentations, and they got their money's worth. I spoke on Friday, and I was super nervous about that one because I was speaking to some folks that are clinicians. I am not a clinician, and I get like weird there. I'm like, I put it up there right off the bat. I said, listen, I feel like I'm not worthy to be here, but I'm going to tell you the story. I'm going to thank all of you because they're counselors and stuff. So I thank them profusely for what they do, and try to pump them up. I spoke at a Michigan area school social workers. And I felt a little nervous. They gave me 2 hours one time to speak in front of these folks. And these are the best of the best. These are people doing the work, like in the trenches, social workers, pulling kids off the ledge. And I always felt like, wow, they're not going to learn much during my presentation because they've done the work. They studied it. They've done the internships, but I'm going to give them some pearls. And it went very well Friday. They were great. They were awesome. I was super nervous about that one. And then Saturday, I did what they had. A Saturday was survivors of suicide loss. It was people that lost somebody to suicide. And if I can't talk to these folks, I can't talk. This is my tribe.
That's right.
Jessica, this is your tribe. I wish you were there. These are people from all walks of life who lost a loved one to suicide. And I told them some things that I normally don't talk about in my normal talk. Like they get it. They get me. And it was emotional. You know how grief works. I woke up that day, I was like super emotional. This room had a different feel to it than the day before because these were all the survivors of suicide loss in the room. Have you ever attended a survivor of loss meeting?
Yes, I've not. Yes, when I was actually doing in social work school, so I have an undergraduate degree in social work. I volunteered at a grief day-long camp, and wasn't just suicide though. But man, that was like, it was horrible, to be honest with you. It was it left this terrible weight on me, and just you forget there's you always, and I want to talk about isolation, but you always feel like you're the only person in the world this is happening to until you get around other people that it's happening. You know what I mean? And then it's like, wow, not just me.
Oh, yeah. That's why I think, because of what we talk about, and grief comes in many different forms, but a grief from a suicide loss is so complicated that sometimes when you go to like a general grief meeting, you feel like they don't get you because it's.
Yeah. These were murders too, which, sometimes I think they're these tragic things, but there's always some stigma that goes along with it, weirdly enough. Like,
yeah.
it's okay if you died from cancer, but that's different.
And
It
what
feels
you'll
weird.
run into? You'll run into in a suicide loss meeting, you'll run into somebody that may have done a murder-suicide too. And that's a very sad, because they don't come home. Like the Columbine shooters, what's his name?
Yeah.
Dylan Klebold, whatever. I saw his mom
Yeah.
speak. And she says a lot of parents, even though her son perpetrated the evil that day, she goes, a lot of parents didn't have their kids come home that day. And I'm one of them. Like, think about it. Her son didn't come home that day.
That's deep, right? Because we're judgmental, right? Like, we quickly are judging too, in a way. I mean, we're human beings, I think we do. We forget that even for us, there's people that are left behind. I've told you that it took me 30 years to be convinced and learn that my dad was not a bad person.
No, it's just
same thing, right?
It was a good book with a couple bad pages. And the last page was awful.
Yeah, that's right.
But the rest of the book was pretty good. Their lives were pretty good. So I recommend that. Dylan Klebold, his mom, I think it was Sue. I don't know her name off the top of my head, but she has a TED.
You did say Sue. That rings a bell, because that was one of the ones that we did that was super. I learned something about myself that day.
Yeah, she has a TEDx talk. Watch her talk. But back to the conference. There were people in the room that had suffered that fate. They lost their loved ones. They're all bad. Premature death is all bad. And then after I spoke, they had a couple other speakers come up. They did a panel where they had lived experience on it, which is always good to hear from the people that were on the brink and they came back.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating panel. Not only was I a speaker at this conference, sometimes when you're a speaker, you zip in, you do your thing, and you zip out. I was mesmerized by the presentations at this thing. Like I was there as a participant. I was taking notes, and that panel was good. Then they had a woman get up there. Her name is Gwen. She did grief. She was phenomenal. Like, this is like an all-star lineup. I still don't feel worthy that I was off there. I kicked it off on Saturday morning. And then we all went upstairs, and they did breakout rooms. People with lived experience went to one room, and then people with loss, survivors of suicide loss, went to another room. Now, here's a funny thing about all this. You could be the organizer of the event. You could be the keynote speaker. You could be whatever you want. But when you get in that room, all the chairs are equal.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone sat in a circle, and we all talked about the loved ones we lost. And that was incredible. And it was right before I got on my flight. And I was like, wow, it was heavy. And then I figured I'll just sleep on the flight, and then I sat next to a guy that was awesome. We talked about camping the whole time, so I didn't sleep at all. He was a great dude. It doesn't happen. But God smiled on me, Jessica. I'll give you a funny story. I was going through this whole grief thing, and all of a sudden I got a little update from my phone about my flight. And I was way in the back. I got upgraded to first class.
Well, that's always a good thing.
It's
happened to me before, and I love it.
It was like,
I take full advantage of it too.
Now I can't go back there with the regular people.
I'm not with the common folk.
The common folk. I can't go back there. It's where I belong, though. But it was awesome. But that survivor of suicide loss, the reason I asked you if you've ever been to a meeting, I'm facilitating one now in Greenville because it is a complicated grief. I actually host one, and it started when I went to another one down in Columbia, South Carolina, that was at a church, and I learned so much. I thought I was done, and I learned so much sitting in that room, and I highly recommend it, Jessica. I know you went to one, hated it.
I had never, but it was before my. I don't want to say this is normalized for me. It will never be normalized. Before I became more engaged with suicide prevention and postvention, I've told you before, and I had not properly grieved until like 4 or 5 years ago. I know that now. I thought I had, and I think that was why it was so difficult for me. Now it's a little bit different. Um, I don't know. It just is. I'm in a different place in my life at a different acceptance level. It's a fluid process.
Well, yeah, I heard hope in that message because someone out there listening may be in raw. Like they went around this room, and I'll tell you as far as, and everyone had different, mine are 83 and 94. I'm pretty much removed from them. I still cry my ass off.
Oh God, yeah.
It snuck up on me. They came around to me, and I just spoke on stage, told my whole story, and I started crying again, right in front of everybody. But that's cool. Shows I'm human. But there were people in there that was raw, and by raw I mean the time frame was short. There was a young lady who lost her husband 14 months ago,
Gosh.
and they have a child. And I wanted to strangle that guy, and he wasn't there because I had to watch his wife cry. And I don't think people who are suicidal understand that, the ripple effect. And they say it impacts, 135 people. I wish I could film one of these meetings and then play it. Like it's almost like It's a Wonderful Life. Then play it back to the people that are suicidal and say, this is what's going to happen. Your mom is going to go to this meeting and she's going to talk about you and she's going to cry her eyes out. And some guy's going to have to get up and hand her tissues because she's crying about you. Now, do you still want to die by suicide? Because that's going to happen. And it's going to wreck her. And it does. The parents.
Oh yeah.
The parents were there, and it was just, you see their look. And this is something a survivor of any kind of loss does. We talked about an article of clothing or something that we have of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And there were parents there that were talking about how they will not wash the hoodie of their son because it smells like them.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally get it. When you're in that room, you're like, oh yeah, I would never wash that thing. But if you said that to the lay public, they're like, what are you talking about? You got to wash that thing. No.
Oh, I don't even get, if my dad gave me something touch, I don't like, no, I wish I'd been like that when it happened, after it happened, because I didn't have any of it. I don't really have anything. I do have, it's funny you say that. I have a picture. It is not a pretty picture. It does not go with my home. However, when my dad did his will, I was his only child. He never changed it because he was 42 years old. I have a will. I'm 51, but at 42, it's like, it's surprised that he had anything. And my dad was a chimney sweep. And he was well known. My dad was a character. He went by the moniker of Dr. Dirt, wore the whole top hat, tails, the whole thing. Yeah. Crazy. Nice. I used to be embarrassed about that. Now I treasure it. And one of the people he did work for gave him an artist proof picture. And it's framed, it's huge, and it's in my living room. That was what he left me in his will, the only thing. And my husband the other day goes, don't you think people wonder why we have that in our house? And it's not really, it doesn't really go. And I was like, I don't really care. I don't care. I don't care if it was a crayon drawing. If they wonder, then I'll tell them. It's the only thing I got from my dad. And I don't mean that in a greedy way. I mean that I covet that thing.
It's a realistic way. Yeah. That's right.
And I'm like, it's okay. Yes, it's a thing. And many people will be like, well, a thing, what difference does it make? And one of the issues I think that I have, and maybe others feel this way to that point, is I do have emotional connections to things. It makes me a pack rat sometimes. I don't know why. Maybe that's a result of not having much from him. Same thing when my grandmother died different. She was 100 years old. She was ready. It was the first peaceful death that I experienced. And I was with her, and I've kept every single thing of hers, every single thing. Wow. And I'm thinking maybe it's a result of not having enough from my dad.
Fair enough. You overcompensated.
You have things from your brothers?
It's interesting. I don't, because the time frame. I had something substantial. You know, it was kind of big. I had met my little brother Matthew when he died. He was in Richmond, Virginia. He didn't have much. He lived in an apartment. I do remember going to his apartment and cleaning it out. Like that's
Oh, horrible.
the dirty stuff of suicide. Somebody already got there and cleaned off the scene because he died there, so that helped. But I had to go in there and I grabbed. He had an answer machine that I gave him. He had my old answer machine, and on that answer machine was me calling him a million times saying,
Oh,
Matt, pick up. I couldn't believe that he was dead. So I said, Matt, pick up the phone, because I couldn't get my arms around. I don't know where that tape is, by the way, but that's me just yelling at the phone. And I took out of there a couple of things. He had CDs and just boy stuff. He was 23. And then I had a weight bench of his for years, you know, and then I had two boys. I thought we used a weight bench. And finally, when I moved, I moved this thing from Pennsylvania. I moved it from his place in Richmond, Virginia to Pennsylvania to Chicago to South Carolina. It's a big, bulky weight bench.
mm-hmm.
And my ex-wife would always say, oh, what are you going to do with that weight bench? And I was always like, don't talk about the weight bench. You know, like it stays. It was like,
Right.
you know, don't bring it up because it'll set me off. And then finally, when I moved from Columbia up here, I was going through this major minimalism thing, and I think I was healing enough, and I just put it on Facebook Marketplace.
Wow.
And I sold it. Yeah, wow. I sold it to a kid down the street. There were so many moving tags on it. It was funny because they had moving tags from when we moved, and I was sitting there. I'm like, obviously, look at me. I don't lift weights, and I just decided I can't drag this thing around anymore. And I don't know if it was symbolic or whatever. I just couldn't drag this thing with me. And I sold it.
Wow. I don't know why that's so hard for me. I wish I could be that. You want it back?
No. Still have no room for it. No, but hopefully someone's lifting weights on it and the spirit of my brother's with them. You know, so.
Well, you know, my dad died in his car. And they brought it back to our house.
Whoa.
And, oh God, again, we're talking about inanimate things now, but connected things. I couldn't look at that car. I could not look at that car because all I could see was my dad sitting in the front seat when they found it. And I was like, we have to get this car out of the driveway. So that's weird because I didn't want that because it was associated with his death. It wasn't a thing of his. It was, but it was different. Like I associated that with where his spirit was, and I didn't want it there anymore.
I get it.
And I can still see it literally sitting in the driveway. It was a Nissan Pathfinder. It was two-tone black and gray. And that was my dad's last resting place, really.
Wow. We have a similarity here, Jessica. My older brother Mark died in his car, and he was 21, and I think he might have overextended himself. He bought a Corvette. It was a white Corvette. Mm-hmm. And for months, it sat in our driveway with like a tarp over the window where my sister tried to get him out of the car. I don't even want to talk about it, but it sat in the driveway and this is a justice story. This is kind of funny. So my dad gets up the nerve one day to sell it. And one of his friends approached him and said, I'll take you, which is kind of weird. I thought off the bat, you want to sell the car? I'll take it. Hold on. The kid died. I don't want any car where someone died in it. There's bad.
Or house, but not out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
My neighbor's house, their previous owner died by suicide in the house.
My mom and dad died in their house in Wilmington. I'm like, sell that thing. I am not moving it. Sell it.
True story.
Well, here's another true story. My dad sells the car to his friend. He takes it down to New York City, and within a month, it got stolen. Poof, it's gone. Out of the family, out of sight, out of mind.
Thank you, right?
Hope you got the insurance. Yeah, thank you.
So that's like a different, I want things like I want a shirt or a t-shirt or there was a while my dad had an obsession with Jimmy Buffett and, 92's when he died. Go back. If you remember those shirts, Banana Republic shirts everybody had. And my dad he envisioned himself a, fashion icon. He was very much into that. And it was when like men were wearing silk shirts and, all of he was just, it was almost like, Miami Vice. We're showing our age, but let's be honest. And I wish I had a t-shirt like that. And I don't know what happened to it. My husband his brother actually died from AIDS, which is also controversial. A lot of
Sure.
stigma, a lot of, thoughts around that back in the 90s, 2 years after my father died. We didn't know each other then, but it's kind of where we connected on those taboo deaths, to be honest with you. And I was cleaning out something the other day after he said that about my picture. And there's this old, literally, you can see through this Harvard sweatshirt. It's been like dangling, right? Like threads.
Wow.
And I was about to say, what are you going to do with this? And then I remembered it was his brother's. And I was like, hands off.
Hands off.
That's yours.
That's
I get
exactly it. Yeah. They
So
were
if anybody shames you or makes you, I mean, that's okay to want to keep things, even if it's a lock of hair. People do keep weird things, and that's okay. That's your business.
absolutely normal. Absolutely normal. If you're listening and you got some stuff there and you're like, oh, it's a weird obsession. No, it's absolutely normal. We're clinging to that person. We're clinging to like something of them. The smell of them. I joked during my presentation. I didn't joke. I said, I have a picture of my little brother Matthew wearing a shirt that I had. We had hand-me-downs. It probably was my brother's shirt. It went right down the whole chain.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know.
And I remember I said this to the people when I was speaking in Michigan. I said I could smell him in that shirt, and that crowd got it. They got it. Like I could smell him in that shirt. We used to wrestle. I could smell that little booger, and they got it. So all good, all
I
good.
wish I'd take a smell in a heartbeat, right?
Just a little whiff, and then smell and they say your olfactory system, smell and music has an incredible.
Oh my gosh.
Bringing you back in memories.
You know my song.
You know it.
I listen to it. I do. You too. Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses? Immediately takes me right back. I mean, weird.
Bam.
Isn't that weird? The brain is a weird thing.
Well, you mentioned something, speaking of brains and weird things, you mentioned HIV. Somebody died from HIV. They've cured people now, a couple of people who were HIV positive through drug therapy. They cannot detect in their blood work any presence of the virus, which is amazing. Victory, right? Huge victory.
Can we cure suicide, do you think?
That's where I was going with it. Well, that's not brain health. If we could dedicate that kind of resources to brain health, I think if you go upstream and talk about mental health, AIDS is the one you hold up. Like, listen, that was a death sentence back in the day. If you got HIV,
when he died, it was, and people didn't want to come around you because they were afraid they'd get infected if they touched you or, helped you, or it was horrible.
Yeah. You know who broke that stigma big time was Princess Diana. Remember, she went to those AIDS clinics and walked in there. It's like, I don't know. She must have had some advanced science or something. She's like, I don't care. Just start hugging these kids. She was awesome that way. And it broke that taboo. But now, like, we're breaking the virus down. But we put a lot of money and effort into that. Let's be honest. We did. And if we could just duplicate that for any other conditions, brain health's one of them, heart disease, whatever the major killers are. But that's the one we hold up and go, wow. That was bad. And now it's still bad, but not so bad. It's not grave.
I feel for my husband's pain for that, because how painful is it? I kind of understand it. To know that if it had just been 10 years later, he'd still be here with him. It was his younger brother, and they were close. And, his son is named after him because he died, right after his son was born. And he's told me the stories. Again, that is literally how we connected, because anyone else I'd been with, and I don't know how your, love life was in the past in your previous marriages. We both have been married before. Maybe Dennis didn't want me to say that, but I will. I have. And nobody ever understood. And I was mad that they didn't. I would take offense. I wouldn't now, because I understand that, you just don't, like, they're not our tribe, right? They don't get it. I hope you don't get it. But when I found somebody that understood what it was like to lose someone in a not what society deems a respectful way, and that's such a misnomer. When you get, and they understand your grief and allow you to grieve and not like, say, he did say something stupid in the beginning, like, what a selfish act. Well, that changed. And he told me, you taught me never to say that and
Oh
why.
yeah.
So, but he was open to learning and thinking differently. And that's a really deep connection you can have with someone.
I would have loved to have seen the look you gave him when he said that. Oh, it's a selfish act. You give him the stare. You give him the death stare. Oh,
I actually was like,
we're gonna talk about
I
this.
think I might have said, that's an ignorant statement, and let me tell you why. Because
It's like,
that's how I say, I get that condescending voice.
yeah.
But maybe not, because I think we had just gotten together, so I was probably still on my best behavior.
Oh yeah. Now you're like, can you step like 2 steps forward so I can punch you in the throat when you say that again? Like now it's like those things that people say, and
Yeah.
one guy,
Yeah. We'll say, bless them. Bless
bless their
them.
heart. But one guy said it on my tennis. He said something about it. I was playing tennis with this guy, and he said something like, "Oh, there's no way to stop somebody." I'm like, I disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree, and I have not played tennis with that guy since he made that statement. I will not do it.
Listen, 2 years ago, a friend said, because I said, and I don't really get, people may have heard this, I don't really get stuck on terminology, but one thing that did, mean something to me is the word commit is negative, right?
Sure.
To me, like you commit murder, you commit child abuse, you commit rape, you commit suicide. It to me, put it in that category of
Yeah, criminal.
negativity. And so this person, I said, I don't really, I like to use die by, because you die from suicide like you die from cancer, or, HIV or AIDS, whatever. And she said, well, it is a bad thing. And we were walking, and it was several of us, and this person's is ignorant. And she said, and I shouldn't say that, but it's not just that, it's other things. And she just kept arguing me. And finally, I just stopped, and I had tears in my eyes. And I was like, you do remember that I'm your friend that lost her dad to suicide. And like everybody was like, dude, let it go to her. Because she just kept on and on. And I was just, and then I said I wasn't going to go back to the place that I would meet her at that she owned, and just to not give any information away. And she called me and was like, I never said that. And I was like, yes, you did. and we're not friends anymore. And I wouldn't be that hateful about it. But even after she knew it hurt me and where I was coming from, she still continued. And I was
Oh my
like,
gosh, she's clueless. She couldn't read the room.
no.
Yeah.
This is,
No,
no, that she's of the mindset like most are, that would never happen to me or my family. Nobody I know would do that.
until it happens.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's everything was good until it wasn't. Yeah.
That's right.
And the
That's
phone
right.
ring. No one's immune from that horrible text, that horrible phone call, that police officer at the door. Nobody's immune from that. And we just, life is hard. And we just got to accept that. And you don't wish it on anybody.
No.
And if she skates through life, that woman, and is not impacted by a devastating loss, she's lucky. And hats off to her. And I take my hat off, but look at that head. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah.
Oh, and for people listening, if you've had someone, because people do say stupid things. Both of us are telling you that. Like, we've had it. I've had it for years. It was really bad, after it happened. The shame, which is, is what I think you, Dennis, and I both, that's what we kind of want to fight against. We don't want people to feel like we felt and have to hide and be, at least I know that's how I felt for a long time. But it's, you have people, you have a tribe. You're not alone.
No, and you got to go find them. You got to go find them. They're out there. There's probably Facebook groups, whatever your trauma is, there's a group for it. And
there's a ribbon for it, and a month, and a week, and a day,
and a day, and whatever. But get with those folks, because they'll get you. Like this Kevin song, I seriously took the stage. I said, "You're my people," and I wish we didn't have to meet this way. Oh,
I think we're trying to build a tribe of people virtually here to give people a place to come and talk. I mean, I think, Dennis, haven't we talked about having some guests on this
Yes.
season?
Yeah, we're going to build a tribe of people. I think I locked one down. A crisis intervention Army chaplain is going to come on, and talk about postvention, right after, which is pretty raw. And how do we quell the anxiety, ground zero, day
Do
two?
we have any, maybe you do because you're much more versed in this. This is Dennis's full-time job. I have another job where I do work in behavioral health, but not just suicide. But do we know what the likelihood is of folks, a family, say like me that lost my dad, of a sequential suicide death, or what is that
A
the right wording?
subsequent.
Subsequent.
Yeah,
I have a
I knew
master's degree.
I knew exactly where you're going. Don't worry about it. I knew exactly where it's going. Some people have a way with words,
Hopefully
and
we can cut
others.
that.
Yeah, we'll edit that out. Remember that Steve Martin line? He goes, "Some people have a way with words, and other people, what's the word I'm looking for?" Yeah, don't. He's one of the greatest comedians, but it's a risk factor.
It was my
That's a
dad's
risk.
favorite, by the way. Anyway.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's a risk factor for sure. Think about it. A previous attempt is a risk factor. Family history. So when Mark died, in my family, he was my older brother. We had a family history.
That's right.
Just like that. And we should have been on guard because in we lost Matt. And now we really have a family history. So that's a risk
I lost
factor.
my dad, and my brother attempted multiple times. So that right there, just the two of us right here can tell you, if that's the importance of postvention. You can save a life after you've lost a life. Why lose two or more? It doesn't end when the person passes.
No, not at all. And the term everyone likes to use in postvention is prevention. And it makes sense because we run the risk in this world of suicide prevention of a thing called contagion. Contagion is like where there's clusters of suicides. It's very rare. It's extremely rare. But then you'll have like a school out and to pick somewhere like Montana will have 3 or 4 in a row. Like, shoot, what's going on there? Like, swoop in and get these kids help. It's extremely rare. Pray it never happens, but that's what we're guarding against. The potential to have.
Well, and that speaks to, I was actually speaking with someone yesterday that works with several superintendents of schools, and she has expressed that just, suicide in schools is sort of common now. I don't remember it being like that. I do remember when I was in high school, it was something you don't forget. There was a death. But what she was saying, what I hear sometimes is schools are really afraid to bring in anybody because they're afraid that it will plant that seed in a child's head.
Which has been debunked like a million times. You can't put the idea in there.
People still think it though, and I'm like, gosh, I mean, come on.
Plus, here's the other, I would love to sit down with their principals and listen, if you have a kid out there that's severely depressed, suffering from depression, and they're going through a rough spot, you don't think they've thought about it already? Like, I'm going to come in and talk about suicide, and the kid's going to be in the audience going, I never thought of that.
Again, it's those people that don't get it. They're everywhere, but we get it.
That's why we do podcasts like this. This is why we do what we do and try to help folks out and talk about it, shine a light on it, and all kinds of taboo stuff. Like we talked about HIV/AIDS today.
Yeah.
And that was the ultimate taboo growing up in the 80s when Freddie Mercury died from Queen. Nobody, we didn't know he had it.
Just watched that. Yeah.
We didn't know he had it until he died. Like,
that's right. That's right. And it was like, oh, okay, well, here's a mainstream person that we all loved. Are we still going to love him if he died from that? I think about the movie Philadelphia. I hear the stories my husband told me about literally people treating him like a pariah. And I was like, wow, that's very similar to the way that my family was treated after the death that we had from my father. It's a shame. That's very dangerous when we don't support folks.
Well, I would like to hear from listeners if anyone's out there, maybe in the comment section. If we any feedback loop, just write me a note at dennis@halfasour.org. Are your states or are there local groups meeting to take on suicide? Like I did a conference in New Hampshire, NAMI, New Hampshire, and a coalition of other.
They trained me. I love them.
Yeah,
NAMI New Hampshire is the gold star, in my opinion.
yeah, they do a lot of training, but they're also part of a coalition of a bunch of other groups in New Hampshire, and they're on like their 22nd conference on suicide prevention. 22 years have been doing it, 24. Who knows what they're at? But
It's
then I go to
amazing.
one state and it's like our first annual. Like, whoa, you gotta catch New Hampshire. They're way out there. But I'm glad you're doing it. I just wonder if there's any other states. I'd love to see one. I'm not aware of one in our state, South Carolina. Do we have a suicide prevention symposium that brings in people and
We're going to.
talk to me?
Dennis and I are gonna make. Dennis and I are connected, guys.
We're
We know
happening.
people, and we're gonna
Well,
try to make some things happen.
we're going to make
but
it happen. We're doing a test of concept with my live show,
That's
March
right.
18th in Greenville, and then
I'll
there's
be
a couple
there.
one, there's a couple ones after that are along that theme. But if we get them all under one roof and make a day, 2 days, 3 days out of it, like Kevin's song was 3 days. They had a faith track. They had a teacher Thursday. They did an
Love it.
educator track. It was unbelievable. And then they did the survivor track the last day. So it was really, I mean, they're 9 years into this, going on their 10th, next year, a decade. They're out there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to steal it.
Well, we have got to make movement in our state because there's a lot of talk. And what we do, and others, we're not alone, is we work in our silos, and that's kind of what I do. I do community, education around behavioral health. We don't. What we need to do is break those, and everybody just come together. There's power in numbers. And I want to tell you something before we finish because I think we're almost done.
You're done.
Dennis alluded in the beginning that I was not feeling great, and I've had some things going on just in my personal life. But I have to tell you that talking today and doing this, talking to people is healing. I feel better. And I talked about something that's horrible that happened to me in my life, and hearing from Dennis and the stories he told, and, talking about the cars and the things. But instead of making me sad and upset, it made me feel better. So it's okay to talk about it and listen to this, and it will make you have your people, and we lift each other up no matter what's going on in our lives. And that's the truth.
Well, Jessica, I like to feel I'm a big part of that. You're feeling better. So I'm going to send you a bill for this session. I'm going to send you a bill. And I
had that earlier.
I take
We're
American
good.
Express, Visa. Oh, you already saw your therapist today. Okay.
I already saw my therapist. We're good. I called her, got her on speed dial. She knows me. By the way, the woman changed my life. I love her.
There you go. So you did the work. You did the work.
Yep.
You're pulling out. You're in a bad spot, but you're going to claw your way out. You're doing the work. All right.
Coping
mechanisms, whatever you're doing. Keep doing it because we got it done. We're into this thing for episode 2 of season 2. We're in
2 and 2.
2 and 2. It's happening. And folks, you've been listening to It's a Tough Subject because you know why? It is a tough subject. And it's aptly named. I'm Dennis Gillan. That's Jessica Seel. See you next time. Take care. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.